Cousin Joe. She took some time out of her day. For all of you, raise your hand if you got a good night's sleep. Leave them up there. You're the only ones here with energy. And then the rest of you, come on, put them all up. That's my exercise for the day. Thank you for joining me. I can say I worked out now. Look, we've got a National Rural Housing Conference scheduled today that I think you're going to really enjoy. We'll talk a bit more about it. I'm going to jump straight into the meat today. So we've got the first woman ever elected to the U.S. Senate in the state of Minnesota, the senior senator, the daughter of a newspaperman and an elementary school teacher from Plymouth, Minnesota, who every time we talk, I hear the stories, and it's a rural experience that so many of us have had, where Plymouth was a smaller farm town, and it grew and it grew. Now, I think Minneapolis has kind of washed over it. Like my hometown, it feels a little more suburban now. That is a particular rural experience that so many of us have had coming from our small towns that we are. She also is a fantastic defender of the rural programs that she feels from growing up in those times, and she's done so very purposefully in the Senate by taking the ranking position on the Ag Committee, which is the Farm Bill, which we all know is where the rural development programs run through. And doing that and purposefully going to that part of the committee assignments has been a fantastic boon for those of us who care about housing, because Senator Klobuchar is one of those. Yeah, give it up for that. We've met a couple of times at what I think is a committee that, through her own force and power as a leader amongst her colleagues, the Senate Democratic policy, she basically has wrangled her entire delegation into every Wednesday morning meeting, and when she has done those things to talk about policy housing, every single time she puts a rural person in the room. It's policy leadership on housing that we care deeply about. It's embodied in the work of Senator Klobuchar. Please help me welcome her to the stage for this morning's conversation.
Wow, thank you. This is an extraordinary group, and I want to thank David and everyone for the work that you've done with housing. I do want to call out our Minnesotans out there, where they are. Yeah, oh, they're very quiet that they're back there. Because our state is truly a state where the women are strong. In the words of Garrison Keillor, our poet laureate, the women are strong, the men are good looking, and all the rural housing is above average. So that's it. So for more than 50 years, this Housing Assistance Council has been a national voice, and we need you now more than ever. I am someone, as David mentioned, that I'm in leadership on the Democratic side, but I also believe strongly in working across the aisle. Last week, this survey came out showing that I was #1 for bipartisan bills and #1 for passing bills, and our staff prepared a press release, and I'm like, we're in a shutdown. It does not seem the best moment to be showing off about how we can get things done. We never did send it out, but I'm hopeful as these negotiations go. I know that they've had an impact on all of you, that we'll be able to get to a point of resolving this, and also some of the things that were going on before that in terms of some of the grants and the work. Because I really see this housing issue as a thing that brings people together, red or blue, brings them together across the geographic lines of urban, suburban, and rural. And I've always argued this case because when I look at what could we do that would really help in rural areas, it's the housing. And it doesn't matter if it's a town that just has some aging housing, if you want to try to bring seniors into the town and then free up their housing for young families, if you have a manufacturing company that you're trying to attract into the town, or you have one now that wants to expand, or if you have simply a rural area that doesn't have enough housing. And I have seen all these innovative ways to do it and incentives we could be putting in place in addition to the existing programs. I just think it's a boon, because I believe that kids that grow up in rural America should be able to live in rural America and work in rural America. And there have been, as you know, a combination of things, broadband, we still have to get some of that money out, pushing every day. Oh my God. But getting that last leg of broadband, because in our modern workforce and you might have a couple where one of them actually physically works in the town and the other one works remotely, all of that can make a difference. So with those possibilities, some of which were a silver lining coming, if there were any, coming out of the pandemic where people realized they could do that, well, you need the housing and, by the way, the child care to make that work. So if I could wave a magic wand right now, I would have the focus of the work that we should be doing, both on the presidential level and then in the Congress, would be on the tools that we need to be a country that makes stuff, that invents things, that exports to the world. And the way you do that, when you look at some of our incredibly hopeful opportunities around the country for everything from robotics to growing things and using them and exporting, a lot of this, you need to have the housing everywhere, not just in the rural areas. So I'm going to go through a few of my ideas here. Just so you know, as David mentioned, I didn't grow up with money. I grew up in my parents got their house on a dirt road in Plymouth, Minnesota, which is now a bustling suburb, but back then they were the only house on the road. And my dad used the GI loan to pay for it. And it was a 3-bedroom, which I will never forget, 1-bathroom house that my mom lived in to the end with brightly colored 1960s appliances. They were kind of, to the end, turquoise and yellow. You can imagine all this. And then they kind of got this kind of cool house that had these wood ceilings, it was very small, but it had these wood ceilings. And my grandma, my grandpa up in northern Minnesota, Ely, Minnesota, rural, was an iron ore miner. And my grandma and grandpa would come to the Twin Cities to visit. And my grandma Mary would look up at the ceiling and go, "When are you going to finish that ceiling, Jim?" Because she was used to only stucco ceilings. But for us, that was it. That was the stability that we had. And when my parents got divorced when I was 16, and I still remember I went and stayed at a friend's when I found out that had happened, and it was pretty devastating. And my friend's dad took me back, and there was my mom shoveling snow in that front yard of the house. So while you felt that your life was falling apart, you had that house. That's where I grew up. And that's where I stayed until I went off to college. That's where I came back for holidays and the like. And when you think about what that means, having had as my life before this job, I was the chief prosecutor in our biggest county in Minnesota. And we did a study of some of the kids that were getting in trouble. And the one through line through all of this was, were they missing school? And then you're like, okay, why were they missing school? Well, they didn't really have a steady place to live was a lot of what was going on. And they were changing around other schools. So all of that dictated my work when I got to the Senate to work on this. And when you look at the rural piece of this, 1 in 5 Americans call rural communities home, including hundreds of thousands in my state. Average family now needs to earn more than $100,000 a year just to afford a home. And while land costs, while escalating, may be less in rural, so that makes it appealing and they can get more space, you still have the input costs for things like lumber and construction, and you have to have the workers to be able to build the housing. And this is even aside from the incentives and grant programs and things that I think we should have in place. So Senator Moran and I, a Republican senator, have worked together to expand the USDA's Section 524 Rural Housing Site Loan Program. Before our bill, local governments and nonprofits faced rigid repayment deadlines that made it nearly impossible to prepare sites for affordable homes, and so we gave some flexibility to build out infrastructure. You've all heard about this movement now to try to look at what rules are really an impediment to building stuff, whether it is infrastructure, whether it is housing, whether it's childcare. And I think that's just got to be a major force right now at the local, state, and federal level to look at how can we make it easier to do this stuff instead of making it take 5 years or 10 years and everyone's going to lose interest and things are going to get more expensive, and we can't do that. We've also made progress with the Road to Housing Act, which is a bipartisan package that just passed the Senate. As part of the National Defense Bill. Hey, it's a form of defense, right? I don't know. Just find a place to put it as far as I'm concerned. And it strengthens manufactured housing, veterans housing, there's our little, yes, and home repair programs, especially important in rural communities where manufactured homes make up a large part of the available housing. We also included reforms from the Rural Housing Service Reform Act, which will make it easier for nonprofits to preserve aging USDA financed properties and keep rental assistance attached to those homes. Construction costs. So I am the only, well, there were two of us senators that decided to spend yesterday morning, are you ready for this, at the Supreme Court tariff hearing. Yeah, I was there. I was like in the room. I was in the room where it happened. I had a seat right in front. And my favorite part was the Treasury Secretary Bessent and the Commerce Secretary also decided to sit there, like right there. And I had so much fun when the conservative justices were asking these very pointed, very good questions about, isn't it Congress's jurisdiction to decide tariffs? Okay, Gorsuch says things like, well, if you're going to take taxpayer money out of someone's pocket under the Constitution, it's Congress that should do it. So you should see me, I'm sitting there because of course, we can't say anything, I'd be very perfect, but I would keep looking over at those cabinet secretaries. Oops, this isn't going very well for you guys. And so, it's not partisan, David. I am commending Neil Gorsuch, okay? I'm commending. Or Justice Roberts, who made the point that it is people that pay the taxes, that pay the costs of these tariffs. Time and time again, we have seen that when you make the case on these tariffs, it is really about a tax on families, $2,000, what it's done to lumber, what it's done to so many of these things. Tim Kaine and Rand Paul and I didn't think you'd see these three names in one sentence. We actually lead, I thought I'd name drop, we lead the bill to reverse the Canadian tariffs, which are really key for states like Minnesota where we can see Canada from our porch, and there's so much going on with the lumber there. Those kinds of things. The Congress actually passed that bill last week. We also did one globally on tariffs. We did one with 4 or 5 Republicans voting with us, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, because they border, in this case, Canada, but do a lot of trade. And then Tom Tillis joined us on one, but my favorite duo of Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell, who don't agree on much, but what do they agree on if there's people from Kentucky here for tariffs? Do you know what it is? Bourbon, yes, bourbon. They don't want bourbon taken off the shelves. So we were able to pass those bills to reverse the tariffs. And they're just now sitting over, I think, in the speaker's candy drawer right now. But we are really hopeful that Congress can push back when it comes to tariffs at the same time that you have this court case, which, by the way, is going to be decided by the end of this year. The justices clearly understood how important it is, and I think that could even things out. Again, it's going to be kind of a short-term disruption. We're going to have to figure out, the president, I'm sure, will be trying to make tariff agreements at that time. But that case, I had a lot of fun, and for some reason, I sat 3 rows in front of the comedian John Mulaney, who also decided to attend the hearing because it's so funny, it's funny. Other thing, construction workforce. Construction workforce is about training kids for the jobs we have today, not the jobs of yesterday, and we really have to think about this. And the presidential debate stage, I always used to say we're not going to have a shortage of sports marketing degrees. We're going to have a shortage of construction workers and electricians and plumbers and the like. Of course, I then lost the support of all parents with kids with sports marketing degrees, so it was kind of a mixed bag. But the point I was trying to make is that these 1-year degrees and 2-year degrees and bringing people into the workforce who maybe weren't always in the workforce is so important here. And these jobs are well-paying, and then at the same time they're doing the jobs, they can seek further degrees, and companies often will pay for that. I mean, there's a whole ecosystem of getting people into these jobs. The other piece of this is immigration reform. And trying to make sure that we have a workforce that includes immigrant workers. I've always believed that immigrants don't diminish. Immigrants don't diminish America. They are America, and they happen to be 30% of the workers in construction trades. And of course, we should have vibrant legal immigration and a secure border, but you can actually make some changes. So many of us support this. Democrats, Republicans we have these gangs. Gangs are good in the Senate. We try to get things done, and then if for some reason it fades away. And I really think that doing something smart where the president could declare victory on the border now, and we could move forward on some of these issues that we need to move forward on. So last thing I'll just say, investing in rural communities, low-income housing tax credit. I lead bipartisan legislation with Senator Young of Indiana, and we know what an important tool that is to keep that moving. We also have to do more when it comes to the comprehensive rural housing strategy, 50,000 rural rental units in the USDA's housing lending portfolio could leave the department's affordable housing programs over the next 5 years, would of course increase rent and cause a problem. I brought up housing yesterday. I'm sure you were all, in the middle of this shutdown, I'm sure you were all tuned into the Ag Committee's hearing on the rural development nominee. But I raised housing at that hearing, and he has some good experience. He comes out of Iowa. I've supported about half of the administration's nominees for Ag, just because I want to find opportunities to work bipartisan on issues like this, and so hopefully he will get done soon. He really seems to understand this issue. And then community development, financial institutions. I'm a big believer. I'm a big believer in CDFIs. I even know the initials right on that one. I just think that I don't like some of the stuff they've been doing on that front, and we're working. There's always been Senator Crapo and Senator Warner. There's been this high amount of bipartisan support for CDFIs, and I hope that we can keep that going. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you in the toughest of times in these political divides where I still believe that courage is not just standing by yourself, giving a speech and yelling at people, that courage is whether or not you're willing to stand next to someone you don't always agree with for the betterment of this country. You understand that. That's why you're in this job. Keep up the great work. Thank you, everyone, and get out there and advocate for what you believe in on housing. Go out there to the Hill and say, we can make people's lives better. Thank you, everyone.
Wow. Wow, huh? Now you know exactly why this is the person we go to in the Senate to sponsor and to lead the work we're doing in rural housing. Again, as she's going out the door, please. I've heard about the enamel yellow stove several times. It's the real deal, as is she. The next real deal you're going to get to hear from this morning is someone who joined the Housing Assistance Council with a storied career and background here in Washington, D.C., recognized as one of the experts, leading experts here for housing legislation, and has particular expertise on homelessness as well. Has worked at several of the leading CDFIs, has had specific jobs in the Senate side and the House side, back and forth, where members are always dragging Jonathan back up to work on their committees. He was Deputy Chief of Staff at HUD, and he has come to us from Buffalo, New York. Please welcome Jonathan Harwitz.
Well, I have to say, Senator Klobuchar is a tough act to follow. I only console myself that at least it wasn't Step Africa. So it's interesting, you know, the title of this session is Housing, a Bipartisan Unifier in a Time of Uncertainty. I think you know, in retrospect, maybe we could retitle it Housing and Bourbon, a Bipartisan Unifier in a Time of Uncertainty. And I am here to introduce a couple of videos from other members of Congress who are very committed to housing. But before I get to that, I just want to say I appreciate David, sharing some pieces of my resume. As I get older, it looks like I can't keep a job. But it's a tough time to be an alleged DC insider, and I love the HAT conference so much, but I do live in fear of folks coming up to me and saying, hey, so what's going on here? What's the inside scoop? And it's tough because you can see all of our HAT staff have Ask Me on our name badges. And so when people come up and ask me, so what's happening? I say, well, let's do this. Let's pull out our phones, and let's pull up the New York Times or Politico webpage, and let's look at it together, and then you know as much as I do. But I think that what is really exciting, and the senator's remarks and the remarks you're about to see show, that while all of the partisanship is going on, and the reality is that this is the longest shutdown ever. I think there are some glimmers of hope that it's going to end soon, but it's having real impacts. There are still people doing bipartisan work, and particularly around housing. And so I want to introduce these two videos. The first is going to be from Senator Elizabeth Warren. I think most people know she's a senator from Massachusetts who has been a tireless consumer advocate throughout her career. She assumed the ranking position on the Banking Committee and immediately got to work with Chairman Tim Scott and they passed the road to housing, as you heard. And that was the first, I've been doing this for 25 years. That was the first bipartisan housing package to emerge from the Banking Committee outside of a time of great crisis like the 2008 recession in my entire career. So that shows the level of bipartisan commitment there. And then you're going to hear from Congressman Zach Nunn from Iowa. Congressman Nunn is in his second term, serving Iowans in the 3rd District. He's a 6th-generation Iowan, where I was just having a conversation with some folks and about how in so many of the places we work, the question is, are you from here? And are you from here isn't, like 30 years doesn't count. It's how many generations are you from. He was raised in a family of public school teachers, nurses, and farmers. He also served the nation for almost 2 decades in the U.S. Air Force, and he's really stepped up as a champion, in particular around one of HAC's and our collective priority issues of 515 preservation, because we all know, those of us who are working on 515 know that the maturity cliff is really approaching. And so we need to accelerate our successes on that. And he is a co-sponsor with Representative Cleaver. You see in your agenda that if the House were in session, I would be up here fireside chatting. I think we have to stop calling it that unless we're actually going to have a little fire on stage with Mr. Cleaver. But they have been incredibly committed, including they introduced the bill at the Iowa State Fair. People are willing to travel to other states' fairs to introduce this bipartisan legislation. And I want to thank Senator Warren and Representative Nunn, and now we'll go to the video.
Hello, everyone. I am so glad to have a chance to join you virtually for the Housing Assistance Council's Build Rural Conference. Right now, America is in a full-blown housing crisis. As housing costs have skyrocketed over the past several decades, more and more Americans are struggling to afford rent or buy a home. We need more housing options everywhere for everyone, including in rural communities that face unique housing challenges like older homes in desperate need of repair, gaps in financing that make it difficult to improve infrastructure and utilities, and of course, rising homelessness. So many of our rural communities have been left behind without the tools or the support to address these challenges. And for too long, housing issues were seen as urban issues. HAC has helped change that and has been leading for decades to put a spotlight on the housing crisis facing rural America and on the millions of rural renters and homeowners who are struggling to access safe and affordable housing. Well, look, there's no one silver bullet solution to the rural housing crisis, but I'm excited to be speaking to you all today about some real progress that's underway. I am proud to have worked with Senate Banking Committee Chairman Tim Scott on an historic bipartisan housing bill with hard-fought rural housing wins that was voted out of committee with unanimous, yes, that's unanimous support, and just recently passed the United States Senate. Wow. So this bill supports public-private partnerships to expand access to financing for affordable housing and to boost modular and manufactured housing construction. It also incentivizes communities to build more housing by reducing barriers to development. And it helps communities recover from climate disasters that leave people without homes. I'm also proud to say that the Rural Housing Service Reform Act, led by Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota and Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota, was included in this package. This bill represents a one-in-a-generation investment in rural housing. It will be a lifeline for rural communities at risk of losing affordable housing stock. This would be the most significant reform to the rural housing service in decades. And the fact that it passed the Senate as part of the package is a testament to your many years of advocacy for it. Now, we didn't just stop there on rural housing issues. The package also includes bills to streamline environmental reviews in rural communities with improved collaboration between the federal agencies, help rural communities struggling with rising homelessness, access more federal funds for emergency shelter beds and outreach, reauthorize and reform the Home Investment Partnership Program to unlock more affordable housing supply, and expand access to small dollar mortgages that help rural Americans own their own homes. It's time for us to build more homes and reduce housing costs for everyone. This bill is a significant step in the right direction, and I am very grateful for your support in helping us work with the House so that now we can get this over the finish line. I look forward to continuing to work with you to ensure the federal government is a strong partner in tackling the housing crisis, especially in our rural communities. Thank you all for staying in the fight. Let's get this done.
Hey friends, it's Congressman Zach Nunn. As you can see, I'm out here in Iowa, and unfortunately with the government shutdown, it means I can't join you for our housing assistance and everything that you're doing. But we're still leading the charge to help Iowans, to help America be able to afford that next home, their first home, or potentially even their last home. And this means real reform in Washington, D.C. With your incredible help, we've had the opportunity to help lead a bipartisan charge, particularly in our Rural Housing Act. Now, we all know this is one of the greatest reforms that we've done in over 20 years for housing. And it matters to folks right here in the heart of the heartland. In my home state of Iowa, over 40% of renters spend nearly a third of their entire income just paying for rent. And for families who have worked hard, who have done everything right and saved, the housing stock not only is depleted, but in rural America, it's often too costly to afford, fix up, repair, and restore for our hometown communities. That's why, working with Emmanuel Cleaver, our bipartisan effort is leading a real change for rural housing. Included in this, we have the opportunity to preserve affordable housing programs through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, including keeping rental assistance in place and as mortgages mature, and it makes it easier for nonprofits to take on at-risk properties to help increase housing stock. Together, we're starting in our big cities to our most rural communities to be successful for housing. It's the #1 thing Americans are asking for, and it's one of the great things that you and I are working on to deliver for our country. Thanks for your support. Thanks for all you do.
Great. So now we're really happy to be able to show you a video that is focused on some tremendous work that HAC has been doing for the last several years. And quite a number of you, I think, were probably here for the heirs property symposium that happened on our pre-conference day. But for those of us, I was at something else, who were not able to go there. We're going to be able to show this video, which, wonderful, which is being supported by Wells Fargo. And I'm going to introduce Jamie Chambers, AVP for Social Impact and Sustainability, to help introduce the video. But for a moment, I just want to say that Wells Fargo has been a long-standing supporter of HAC, and I want to express personal gratitude, because it was a grant from Wells Fargo that actually enabled HAC to establish its policy division and hire its first public policy director. So I personally appreciate Wells Fargo, but they've also were the seminal funder of this work, and I'm going to turn it over to Jamie.
Thank you for that introduction, Jonathan. In the affordable housing and housing finance sectors, there's a collaborative effort underway to develop solutions that support heirs property owners and preserve affordable housing and communities. As part of that growing movement, the Housing Assistance Council, with proud support from Wells Fargo, partnered with practitioners dedicated to preserving Black communities and generational Black homeownership. This project, Heirs Property, Elevating the Story, aims to highlight the complex, nuanced, and diverse experiences of heirs property owners and the organizations that support them. A series of videos spotlights the voices of community members, leaders, and practitioners, offering a platform for their stories to be shared directly with a wide range of audiences. The video series features Hale County, Alabama, in partnership with Auburn University's Rural Studio, Eatonville, Florida, in partnership with Help CDC and the Bell Alexander Enterprise for Land and Legacy, St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, in collaboration with Acacio Consulting. And if you attended Tuesday's Heirs Property pre-conference session, you were able to view 2 of these videos. And so today, I am excited to present the world premiere of our video highlighting St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands. We also want to recognize Virginia Claremont, CEO of Acacio Consulting, who is our partner for this video, Senator Maurice James of the U.S. Virgin Islands Legislature, who is featured in the video in here today, and Senator Clifford Joseph, also of the U.S. Virgin Islands Legislature, also here with us today. So if you're in the audience, can you give a wave? Great, thank you. St. Croix is a beautiful island with a rich history of strength and resilience. Its vibrancy shines through its people, natural resources, and its culture, and the influences from the indigenous Caribs to West African traditions and Danish and Spanish cultures. Land ownership in the U.S. Virgin Islands has a unique context. The territory has flown under 8 different flags, with 7 nations claiming ownership throughout its history. This complex past, combined with its current status as a U.S. territory raises a critical question. Who truly owns the land across the three islands? In a place there was once a hierarchy of ownership, from the ownership of laborers to the ownership of land, a legacy of hierarchical land control still persists. Conversations around heirs property, property rights, land ownership, and retention take on distinct meanings in the territories. As national attention grows around land retention strategies, it's essential to include places like St. Croix, Virgin Islands, a majority Black rural island within a U.S. territory, in the development of these solutions. Title issues affect not only individual families, but communities as a whole. We invite you to now enjoy the powerful world premiere of this video, which showcases community leaders and the beauty of the land, people, and culture of St. Croix. As you watch, we encourage you to consider how St. Croix, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and other territories can be intentionally included in the design of solutions and deployment of capital to preserve homes, communities, and the people within them. All right, thank you.
We have a real attachment to this place. We know our ancestors walked on this land, right? And we see remnants of that period every day. We can't escape it. And we understand the sacrifice that was made for us, right down to obtaining our own freedom and then demanding fair wages. And then our ancestors being able to buy these properties, and now they're falling into disrepair. If these homes, these buildings disappear, our culture disappears forever. It's very personal for us.
Hi, my name is Virginia Claremont. I am a community advocate in the town of Frederiksted, where I was born and raised.
My name is Claudette Young-Hines, and I was a resident of Frederiksted in the early 90s. I've been on St. Croix since '83. In my personal and professional life, I've been involved in a range of projects and initiatives and things in the town of Frederiksted.
My name is Colette Woodson Burgess. I was born and raised here. Went away to school, came back, and decided I was going to be here forever. I'm a member of the St. Croix Historic Preservation Committee. I'm actually acting as chairperson for the past year and a half.
I was born on the island of St. Croix and raised on the island of St. Croix. Spent all my years here except for when I went to college and law school.
We have the 8 flags. I always correct people, they talk about 7 flags. No. The Amerindians, who were here first, their flag has to be respected. You know, people use the word Arawak, Caribbean, interchangeably. The Kalinago were the first peoples of this island, Aye. And, increasingly people are acknowledging those who inhabited the land first. So this is Aye. The Kalinago were the people. And then you had the other 7 folks come. So all of those things, just imagine folks could come to Frederiksted and experience a little of the Danish experience, the French experience, the British experience, the Amerindian experience, the African experience.
In the Virgin Islands, we have a unique relationship with land. Land is their history, it's their culture, it's their heritage.
In terms of the ancestral memory that we have as people of color, there was no such thing as land ownership. You met the land here and you leave it better for your children. You'll read where people on the African continent when the Europeans talk about we're going to put up a fence and own this, they were kind of laughing at them like, we own you, take it with you, you know? That concept of owning what God created, in terms of our ancestral memory, I think is pretty foreign. Because of the history of enslavement, both in the upper 48 and here, property ownership is not something that kind of ran through our genes and we did it, and it's something we always did and we always had access to, okay? It wasn't until manumission or emancipation that people of color, people of African descent, could even think about owning a piece of land, okay? Massa might have let you work a piece of land, but it was not yours, okay? And so the concept of land ownership and passing that land down to someone is a fairly recent occurrence in the lives and the ancestral memory of people of color under the capitalist system in the United States of America.
Dave, the value of land is important to Crucians because it goes back to the fact that we emancipated ourselves. I think in 1848, people realized that here I am planting cane, cutting cane, you know, and this land that I'm on doesn't belong to me. So for me, I think in 1848, we realized the value of the land. Again, with 1878, with the fire burn, we again realized that if we are working, we have to have something that we're working for, right? And something that we own. We were brought here to this land, and so it should belong to us, and we should hold it sacred.
Folks have connection to land. There are families that acquired property at a time where it was dangerous to do so and incredibly difficult. And their families have held on to that property over so many generations. We're looking at 5, 6, 7 generations of folks who are still on land that their ancestors were enslaved on and acquired that property through indentured laboring. When we think about the history and folks' connection to the land that their family has toiled on, they've raised generations, have connections to, it's very important that we find ways to protect that land for those that have ownership to it.
I talk about these major crises that happen on the island of St. Croix especially. I was in high school when Fountain Valley happened. And at that time, there was a mass exodus of people, mostly people from the States who came, that resulted in people who were from here, the locals, being able to purchase homes. So in that sense, I saw a change in subdivisions or developments where they went from mostly white to black. Then later on, Carambola was being developed and the condos were built. People were building houses. There was the boom that was happening, and then Hugo hit. Again, exodus of people. So we rebuilt, and then again, Hovenza closes. Again, the exodus. So those are the changes that I have experienced in my lifetime here. And of course, recently, Irma and Maria.
Ayers property in Frederickstead looks like dilapidated properties that are in ruins. Literally, they are falling apart because they have been in, probate sometimes for decades, and nothing is being done to them.
A lot of properties that do go into probate have been left to numerous individuals. There's some properties that grandparents or great-grandparents left to 15, 20 people. Some of them have disappeared. Nobody knows where they are, but they're still named on the property. So as a result, in order to initiate a probate, you pretty much have to find most of these people. So it's an involved process. It's expensive. You have to get an agreement from everybody as to what it is you're trying to do once you get it probated.
Because there are multiple owners, now they're all owning it as tenants in common, which means I have my percentage, you have your percentage, and we holding on to our percentage, but we're not participating or coming together to maintain it. So the property then, over time, it deteriorates. In our case, really, what we're not being honest about is they have actually gotten destroyed in the hurricanes. And after hurricanes, people just didn't have the insurance on the properties to repair and restore. And no one wanted to, I don't want to invest my money because I only own 1/10 of it. So then, as time progressed, properties just got more and more dilapidated.
The impact of Ayers property on community and economic development has been pretty severe. It's impacting our economic development, it's impacting our community development, it's impacting the morale of the people that live here. And then if you go from the impact of the morale, and you can go down the line to all of the other things that are associated with that. You just see the despair of the community and feeling like we'll never advance, we'll never become prosperous. These properties will be available for others who can afford it to snatch up.
My vision for St. Croix is that we will become a place where we are more hopeful.
When I look at a lot of these properties, I see places where people once lived. I remember the families, I remember the businesses. They're not ruins, they're homes. It belongs to somebody, they have history.
Property should be used for its best purpose. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean development. Best purpose could be a nice park, or it could be a hotel sitting there all these years. Those properties are not being used for the benefit of anyone.
It's an incredible opportunity for us to protect and promote. We talk about preserve, promote, and profit. Preserve the history and the culture and the environment, promote it, and profit.
From my standpoint, I don't really think we should leave these kinds of issues up to our government. I think the community change happens from a grassroots level, and that it needs to be informed by the people. We have very unique needs in the Virgin Islands that doesn't always translate to the mainland, and things that are happening in the mainland. We need to be engaged in the process of change. Our voices need to be heard.
So my vision is that we have development, not simply growth, and development with such care and respect for the culture, for the environment, for sustainable economic development, and for respect that for those that are met here and for those who choose to make this their home. There's got to be mutual respect.
I think that there's a space for philanthropic organizations to help us change the face of St. Croix.
If philanthropic organization then decides we're going to invest, and I want to say particularly into nonprofits to do this work, there is almost an immediate return on their investment because we're a small community.
One of the main goals of the Historic Preservation Commission is to see these derelict buildings, as they're called, derelict, but buildings that are in a state of disrepair, that they be returned to their glory that they had back in the day.
Oftentimes we are left out of, for instance, if you're a philanthropic organization, they tend to mainly to give money mainly to the mainland, and the territories are excluded, and so there's a whole area of funding that we can't access. I would just like to see investors change their way of thinking as they relate to the territories. There's more to us than just, sun, beach, and sand. We have high rate of poverty here. We have food insecurity here. We have, transportation issues, structural issues, systematic issues. So, just think in terms of there's a whole group of individuals, 3 million of us, that are being left out of the conversation.
For the housing and housing finance systems, it's important to create products and funding sources for housing rehabilitation, for housing construction, for housing rehab that don't require a legal clear title. We have to consider the barriers that exist for residents in the territories, for example, in St. Croix, even without property title issues. Because if we are to, for example, say the pathway forward is to resolve title issues, clear titles, get folks through the legal process, well, then they're still going to face barriers in accessing the housing finance system because of the lower presence here on the island. So it's important to take the experiences here, the insights of local residents here back to our national partners so that they can really investigate how they can expand their reach to support the territories, example, here in St. Croix.
Shops at this point. I should point out, enjoy yourselves. The workshops start at 10:15.